Hello, hello. I knew we'd be busy today. Oh my God, for a summer call, this is like record breaking.
Oh, these are
Sent,
just my pals.
no. I sent Jen a sneaky message going, hello, who has star quality here? You're like as much as, because Curtis like broke all records. Curtis had like more views after his call than like
Typical.
anyone ever. And I confess, I went afterwards. I was like, what the hell do you do? What? Tell me your
He pays
secret.
us. He pays us all.
But you're pretty close there with Curtis. Okay, so
I am
let's
close
jump
with
right in.
Curtis.
I asked Jen on this call. I mean, she's hugely talented. She's got this like fascinating backstory. Everyone loves her. The reason I asked Jen is because I was a total suburban girl growing up in Fresno, and I'm madly jealous of the cool city girls. And you have the acting family. You're such the cool city girl. Like I've got pictures of like a Fame childhood. You know that? Remember that show Fame?
Oh my gosh, of course. The TV show, how about the movie? The movie was like life-changing to me as a child.
Yeah, I knew it.
And
I knew you'd be a Fame
my
girl.
very first oh, Jim will love this. My very first Broadway show audition, I was 18. I went in and sang, Allie, you're on my own from Fame, the Irene Cara song. I walked in, I wasn't really a belter, tried to belt it, and they were like, someday you are going to have a really good voice. And that's all they're like, bye. And I was like, bye.
Well, for an audition, that's a lot, though. That's like kudos for an
Hey, I
audition.
was 18. I was like, that's fine.
Yeah, that's more than fine. I could write on
Yeah,
that one for like 6 months.
I did.
Okay, but I want to go back further. You know me. I'm going to do this.
It's
10-year-old
fine.
Jen. And also, I want to know about the impact because you had quite a famous, I know your father was famous. I'd like to hear the connection because one of our last, Dan Padavana, was talking, and his father was like really, really famous. And he said that it affected him growing up. Like,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
like the relationship to like growing up with somebody that's such a larger than life figure. I'd like to hear about you at 10 years old and also how that colored 10-year-old Jen's life.
Well, my dad is famous in a way. He's famous in certain circles. Your man on the street would not know who my dad is, but Broadway people, Sondheim people, particularly, he's was in that world and for a long time. So he's famous in that way.
But
In the New
but in
York,
your world, he was probably larger than life then, right? I mean, because
well,
nobody would know who my father was, but he was
right.
like everyone wanted to be around him. And I think that's more what I'm talking about. Living with
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
that
yeah.
has that much.
Well, so my parents were divorced. So I was not I was not a city girl. I mean,
Oh,
I did grow up in New York City in the summers, but my parents divorced when I was 3.
okay.
And so I lived with my mom in Denver and Dallas. We moved to Dallas at one point, but Denver. And my dad lived in New York City or wherever he was doing a show. So often, mostly I would spend my summers in New York City. But sometimes it would be LA. Sometimes it would be like Richmond, Virginia, where he was doing a show or just random places.
Right.
And I only saw him once a year, mostly, for the most part.
Oh,
So
okay.
10-year-old, and my mom was a single mom, and she was a dancer and a choreographer. So it was a magical childhood in some ways.
Yeah.
Because when I was with my parents, I was backstage, I was with show people, I
Wow.
was living this kind of hippie 70s theater family life. But when I wasn't with my parents and they were working, or I wasn't with my dad during the summer, I was mostly with my grandmother who lived with me. And um, she was, could be the life of the party, but she wasn't necessarily the life of the party with just her granddaughter at
Right,
home
right,
taking
right,
care of her every day.
right.
So she loved me and she did a good job taking care of me, but it was lonely. I had a lonely, there was a big quadrant of my childhood that was intensely lonely.
Were you an
And
only child?
at that point, yes, I have half brothers and sisters now, but
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And so it was an interesting life. I think that's why I feel most safe, most at home, most myself in a theater, because that's when my happy times were, and that's when I was with my parents
Yeah.
backstage and at shows. And back then, as a kid, there wasn't any like kids can't be backstage. I was always backstage, always. And it also gave me a really kind of inside knowledge of how to be around people, how to be appropriate, how to be funny, how to be quiet, how to read people. I mean, you got to read people backstage. So that helped me intensely as a young girl who then went on to do my own stuff, to understand how to be in a show and how to be fun, but not too
Around
fun.
people. That explains the 600 people joining the call today. It's the,
So my childhood was strange. It was very, very magical in 1970s and theater and Broadway and New York City. And God, I just longed for New York City in the 70s and 80s. It breaks my heart when I'm there, which I am often. Because it's just not even close to that anymore. But
so, but
I
so when you
digress.
were with your grandmother,
Mhm.
what was your inner world like? Were you creating, drawing, dreaming, angry, pissed off,
I was
planning your
pretty
future?
No, I was pretty sensitive. Gosh, I'd like to draw. I like to listen to music. My dad would always send me books and music. And so I would just, and albums, So I would sit there, he would send me an album and I would sit there and just listen to the album over and over again, reading the lyrics 1,000 times, just sitting there, just doing that. And learning how to sing because of that, honestly. Not because I was like, I'm going to learn how to sing, but just learning how to sing because that's what my father is mostly. And that's just what I had to do. But it wasn't like in a performery way. I wasn't like, I'm going to be in showbiz. As a matter of fact, when it came time to graduate high school, I mean, I got into theater and doing shows in junior high and high school and stuff like that. But
Because I was going to ask about high school because I'm surprised with that background and the longing and yearning and then the excitement and then I'm surprised that you didn't go into a very, very rebellious period, or
oh
did
gosh,
you?
no, no, I never did anything wrong ever.
Really? See, it's amazing. That's some says something about your character though, that
Never, never,
all those
never.
highs and lows and you stayed stable through everything.
Yeah, but I think when you have separation from your parents, whether on a daily basis or long term, like I did with my dad, you're you haven't tested out being bad. So you don't really want to test it out. I wasn't the kind of
Oh,
kid who was going to do that to get, do you know what I mean? I
yeah,
wasn't,
that makes sense.
I'm like, I don't know what would happen if, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know how to
yeah.
explain it. My
No,
parents are,
no, that's very clear. You've made it. I've got a picture of Jenn. So when did you?
I wasn't scared of them. I've thought about this because people are like, oh, you must have been a wild kid. And I'm like, well, I was in Texas in the 80s going to high school at the height of 1985. I mean, we did our share of drinking and partying, but it wasn't rebellious. It wasn't anything, it wasn't rebellious. It was just what you did in Texas. Yeah.
Again, but you know what? It's kind of
happen.
reductive of me to ask the question, isn't it? Because just because I have to challenge, I'm thinking, oh, Jenn's a New York kid. And I was in the suburbs, and the minute my parents went on vacation, I held 4-day parties with complete strangers and kegers. And my reasoning was, if they don't leave the house in the whole 4 days, then nobody will get in car accidents, drink driving. So I'm being responsible, right? So you can't assume about
I also
someone.
think my parents were actors, hippies, for the most part. They weren't and aren't the kind of people who, they had broad boundaries themselves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My parents are the most loving, most wonderful, amazingly magical humans, but they were living a certain kind of life at that point. And I don't know, if I had had a party, would they have been annoyed? Sure, but I don't know, maybe not. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like,
so you didn't have to rebel, really. There
not
wasn't.
really.
Yeah. So what challenges did you have? Like when you became who you are, personality, character-wise, what do you think your biggest growth was?
Well, it was hard for me later when I got into my teens, because my dad, we know and knew a lot of famous people, right, in New York City. Kevin Kline, Cheetah Rivera, all kinds of people. And they would know me in the summer when I was with my dad. And, but when I eventually moved to the city, they would only know me in a certain context. But to me, they were my friends. But sometimes they wouldn't know me if I wasn't with my dad. Now, as an adult, I understand that. As a matter of fact, I was just at a barbecue with a child who I knew very well, and I had no idea who they were because I hadn't seen them in like 3 years.
Yeah. And kids
But
change, and
that was hard for me, because in my innocent mind, I was like, well, Kevin Kline, I sat next to Kevin Kline at dinner and he said this and that, and I pass him on the street and he doesn't know who I am. Like, what the, you know what I mean? But I get it now more. I understand it as an adult. I understand it more. I understand that you can be chummy with a kid at a party and that doesn't mean you're their best friend. But in my kid mind, right, you're like, you gave me to me on my 14th birthday.
Yeah.
How can you not remember that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I get it now. I understand it. It took me a while to understand it and to kind of forgive that. Not that there's anything to forgive, but to understand how that can be.
Yeah.
And I think the other hard part was I had no sense of what you could be except a theater person. Zero. There was nothing in my mind that said, maybe you should be an artist. Maybe you should be an English major. Maybe you should study art history. All things that maybe you should do fashion design. All things that I think I could have done and learned and explored and been successful at. I had no sense of doing that at all. Because I came from a family of doctors. What do you become? You become a doctor, except they're theater people. What do you become? You become a theater person.
Way cooler than doctors.
Right. But I came to New York, with one professional show under my belt, and I just came to New York. I just came to New York. I didn't go to college. I didn't apply to the right colleges. I didn't know how to apply to the right colleges. We didn't have money for college. So I didn't train until I was already doing a Broadway show. Then I trained myself.
Yeah.
Because I felt guilty. I felt like, oh, I have to get training. And I'm glad I did, but I just came to New York and just was like, okay, I guess I'm getting a job.
That's
It
amazing,
was
though. That's a
crazy.
dream.
It
That's
was
a
nuts.
dream.
It was absolutely nuts.
Did you have moments where you were like eating ramen and like, what the hell am
No,
I going to do for food?
I got into the Fantastics pretty quick,
Well, that's
pretty
good.
quick. Like in I think it took maybe 6 months, and I was the youngest girl in the Fantastics.
Wow. Wow. How did
And
it
that
feel
was
the moment?
magical.
How did it feel the moment you found out? How did it
The
happen?
Fantastics, we have these shows in my family that are like family shows. So the Fantastics my dad has done, my stepmother has done. So this felt like, of course I'm going to do the Fantastics because that's what we do in this family. We do the Fantastics. But it felt magical because it felt like, okay, I'm not going to college like all my friends, which I had shame about. But I felt like I'm going to the village every day. And that felt like my college, kind of,
Why,
it
where
was,
did that shame come from? From, because it didn't come from your parents, obviously. Did it come? Because
oh,
I
my
had that
parents didn't go
shame.
to
I went
college.
later. Yeah,
No.
see, my parents gave me tons of shame, so I went later because of that shame.
Oh, no, they didn't. No, of course not.
Yeah.
No, they didn't go to
So
college.
where did it come from for you? Where did it come from?
I think these, at that point, the league schools like NYU,
Yeah.
um, Yale, and, all the league schools, that was the thought about how you became a real actor. You went to a league school, and there was no money. There was no money for me to do that, one. And two, I didn't even know. I went to a couple of auditions, but I didn't know how to audition for a league school.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was flat by
These
this.
kids are being raised to like that's their audition and they've been like
Right. Are you
rehearsing
kidding
for
me?
it
I have
since they were
two
two.
daughters. I went through the whole, musical theater school audition process recently. So I get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I was so lucky, and I was blessed being able to sing, and I was blessed with having a inner dialogue about being on stage that I learned by watching people on stage. So,
What do you mean by that?
well, I learned how to base act or understand good acting and bad acting by doing absolutely nothing but watch people on stage as a child.
Hmm.
And not like I'm sitting in my theater seat. I mean, like I'm standing in the wings, I'm sitting in the aisle, I'm watching people doing their entrances and exits, I'm watching rehearsals, I'm there during tech.
You're listening
I
to the director's feedback.
I
Yeah.
understood so much of it without ever studying it, because it was just where I was raised and where I was happiest. I don't think I don't think it's a coincidence that the happiest parts of my life with my parents were at theaters, and the learning that I did from that, the real knowledge about acting and singing, also came from that scenario.
Yeah.
So I knew a lot of stuff without going to a class, because it was just the way I was raised. And so that was good for me, because I came to New York as an 18-year-old, and I could sing and I could act as well as I needed to at that point.
And 18 is an exquisitely, I mean, talk about you're full of dreams and hopes and hormones. And I don't want to lose this moment. I want to interject. We've got some guests. Jennifer
I'm gonna
says you were, sorry? Sorry. Jennifer says you were seeing what worked and what didn't. Even as a kid, you couldn't explain exactly what it was. And James says the Fantastics, favorite musical of all time, and that he worked with your dad. And we'd
oh,
mentioned you before the call, James. I'm so happy you were able to join tonight. I said James is like one of my all-time faves. So
yes, I feel like she'd rather have you up here, James.
I've already had James twice. James is
I
like
know.
and then Craig has a question. Is there any decision in your past where you had complete freedom, choice, and now freedom of choice, and now you wished you would not have made the choice you did?
Complete freedom of choice. I mean, not that I could think of. Oh, yes, yes. Oh my God, you're gonna love this. Okay, so like at 20, someone comes up to me and says, you know, they have studio apartments at the top of Carnegie Hall. And I know how you can get one, and it's $400 a month. And I was like, oh, I can't afford that. Oh, that I've never forgotten that. I also was on tour once, and there was this beautiful coat next door in this thrift shop next to the theater. And it was my first tour, and I was making plenty of money, but I didn't really understand money.
Wait, you got to tell, what did it look like? You can't, don't
Oh,
jump
it was
ahead.
like a 20s sort of like fake, what is that? Like seal, almost, it's like a fake seal fur, but it kind of was wavy.
Wow. How long was it?
Like it was
Sorry,
short.
I'm going on a
It was
tangent.
long, and it was like a shawl coat, and it was long, and it was black, and it was had this beautiful shawl collar, and it was so like, oh.
Oh, it was a meant to be coat.
It was a meant to be coat. And then I kept going back and looking at it between shows and stuff like that. It was right next door to the theater. And then I didn't get it because I hadn't been making that paycheck quite long enough to feel like I could. And I never forgot about that coat.
Do you know what's funny? Most people regret the things that they splurged on. You regret the two things you didn't.
I'm not a shopper. I've learned my lesson. If I'm drawn to something so ridiculously, I just buy it because I'm not a shopper. I don't really love to shop. So I've learned to just buy the things that really speak to me.
Yeah. Sorry, my brain is trying to get around somebody that spends lots of time in New York and can't be bothered to shop. I just such a waste.
Exhausting. I find it exhausting.
Yeah.
It's tiring to me.
Oh.
My husband laughs. I'm like, I'm going shopping. He's like, sure.
Yeah, I've already been scoping out where they hold APAC and where they hold the narrators retreats and what shopping is nearby, because why would you do anything in the world if you weren't going to do shopping? And Laura says she loathes it.
I have not had a lot of times in my life where I could buy the things that I really would want, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I see. I'm happy even window shopping. Okay, we got a question. Barbara Hensley, what was your role on the Fantastics and how long did it run?
Well, there's only one girl in the Fantastics. As a matter of fact, her name is Luisa, but they call her the girl. So I played the girl. And the Fantastics is the longest running off-Broadway show. Am I right, James? It's the longest running show. Yeah. So it's not still running though, right? It's not still running. It just recently closed. James? I can just see him at the top. I can't see the top. So I was in it off and on about 3 years, but like I did it once for about a year and then I left. And then, you know, it's like a family, right? And this is always the same way with these shows, these long running shows, which I've done a couple of. It's like, you go away and then they're like, can you come back for 6 months? Oh, this person's doing this. Can you come back? So I did that. At one point I was understudying and working in the box office because I needed the job and they had a girl at that point. And I was just like, I'll do it. So it was a back and forth thing.
Like the family
little known trivia.
James
wants little known trivia. The reason that it ran as long as it did is because Laurie Noto, who was the original girl's father, owned the building.
Yeah. Yeah. And one time we came to the theater for our show and the building next door had fallen down. I mean, rubble.
Why?
Rubble. Because there is in the village, they're the oldest buildings in the world. That building that we did that show in was like, you would go down into the cellar to go to the bathroom. And it was like, is this place going to fall over on top of me? I mean, it was beautiful. It was fabulous, but it was a very old building.
What were the dressing rooms like? I love dressing rooms in old theaters.
There's no dressing room. It's about this big. this big, and the girl had a curtain for herself that would
Oh,
keep her from the guys. But it was just one big thing like that.
so
Yeah, no dressing rooms.
so you're happily going on along life, acting, immersed in
Uh-huh.
the world. Um, can I ask where you met your husband and fell madly in love, or is that not?
Which one? Which one, Dan?
Oh, that's even more exciting. Lots of true loves.
Lots of husbands. Lots of true loves. You know, this, I was thinking about all these things as I was driving about this call. I was like, gosh, I've had a lot of stuff happen to me, and I've had so much love in my life, and it makes me kind of weepy. I mean, like really romantic, heart-stopping, what you want to happen in your life. And I've had that a lot of times.
Did
A
you
lot of
appreciate it when you had it? Because
I
I was
appreciated it every time.
but see that I realized the other day that I didn't. I had these like amazing, romantic, wonderful things happen, and my story was always, well, I didn't think people would believe me. They'd think I was being a drama queen. So, like, I didn't appreciate it when that happened. You really did live
Um,
in the moment.
oh yeah, yeah. I really could get into being in love and being in a relationship
I
and
love
having
that.
those sweeping romantic things. And a lot of it turned out very badly, heartbreakingly.
But it's
Heartbreak.
got to, or it's
It's
not
got to,
real
right?
romance.
It's got to. My
Yeah.
first husband, we were young. I had a terrible self-esteem. He was a great guy. I didn't think anyone else would ever want me because my high school love, who I was convinced I was going to marry, and we were together for until we were 20 something. He actually went to a league school when I went to New York.
Ah,
He
so
ended up doing plays on Broadway. But anyway, he broke my heart. And that was hard to get past. So when my first husband and I got together, I did love him. I loved him very much. Should I have married him? No. But I did. So it didn't last very long. And I felt bad about that. And then my second husband, we were together for 13 years, and we had our daughters, which are the absolute loves of my life. I don't need any more love in my life, even though I have a great, better than great husband who I'm also obsessed with. But
I mean, I have to say, I don't talk about people's children too much, like on here, just because it's online. But
oh,
your
they're older.
daughters shine. I
Yeah.
mean, they literally shine. And I know everyone loves their children. Everyone's children shine, in their own way. But there is just something that you've poured into them that when you see a picture of somebody and and it's not, oh, they've got such and such hair. You've
Yeah.
done something right. You've done something really well. The shining from their eyes, the happiness is evident.
They are also complicated, sensitive women, but they
Mm.
are, to me, the only thing that matters besides the rest of my family and my husband and my friends. But my daughters, I don't know.
Yeah. No,
It's very,
that's quite something. I admire people that build strong people.
yeah,
I'm not a mother, so it's not something I've ever wanted to do and I've ever want to
I
do.
didn't either. Oh boy,
But
did I not want to.
I admire people that make it work. I really do. I think it is just you've done something special.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, the interesting thing is they have their own, they're humans who have really complicated and hard things to deal with. And I really struggled being a mother of young children. I really did. So we see these beautiful women who seem very strong and everything like that. And you see me and I seem, woo, whatever. But you talk about dark nights of the soul. I really thought I should not have had these children. I should not have had these children. I am not the person who can handle it.
I think so
I
many
don't,
women think that though, and most of them don't feel free to say it because what is they feel
well,
that it makes
I'll
them.
say anything, but
But
it was hard.
it's important. It's important that more people say it because because the picture that is presented on social media of a mother isn't like reality. And then you
Mhm.
get this shock. I mean, I see it all the time. I see the mother and the father. It's usually the father's like my friend. He's so happy the child's there and the glowing pictures. And it's like
Yeah. I mean,
I feel bad for the mother because I remember my mother, and the primary emotion I remember was complete anxiety,
mhm, mhm, mhm.
like at all
And I
times.
mean, it's hard to mother adults. And I've cried with Laura maybe more than once about this, about daughters and how hard it is and how you want to do the best thing for them. But anyway, yeah,
But
it,
I think
it's human stuff. It's human stuff.
it's the same as acting, though, isn't it? It's the same as acting, having the guts to jump in and having the because Anna, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this, but she says she's got the same philosophy with her daughters. They're adults, they're human beings. You have to respect that first and foremost, and then be the best mother you can. I hope I didn't misquote you, Anna, if you ever watch this. But um, but the thing is, that to me is also what it takes to be a good actor, isn't it? That you have to take care of yourself, respect the people you're with, respect everything, do the best you can, and assume that you don't know how it's going to end. Right? You just have to
I think
jump
that
in.
I think for me, there's a lot of bravery or needed bravery for all those things.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to have panic. I left Les Mis for 3 weeks because I was having panic attacks. My dad had panic attacks on stage. Um,
Do you know why? Did you ever get to the
well, usually it's for both my dad and I, usually it's because we are doing some kind of long running show and you get to the point where it's not mechanical, but there's a certain part of it that is mechanical. You don't think about what the next line is when you've been doing it for 2 years, 22 years, whatever. Not that you're not invested or trying to make it in the moment, but you know, the reality is you've been doing it for a while. And then all of a sudden you'll have a glitch. And I had a glitch and I couldn't think of there. If you know Les Mis, Cosette comes onto the stage and she has a bit of a monologue where she sings and walks along the turntable and talks about questions she has in her life, and then finally Valjean comes in and says, "What's wrong with you, my daughter?" But she sings for a while by herself, completely empty stage, just you, and I couldn't remember it. And I just walked around on the stage acting silently while the orchestra is playing. And then finally, when Valjean would come in, then I would go, scene partner. Now I know what I'm supposed to say. And so,
wow?
but doing that once, okay, it happens.
If you've
But
ever been on stage right now, you're trying to restart your heart.
right. And then you have muscle memory of that happening the next time and the next time and the next time.
Yeah.
And then if it catches on, it rolls. And it rolled to the point where I would get to that point. And sometimes I would even know what I was supposed to say, but I would be panicking. That panic response would start. And it got to the point where I was literally maybe almost blacking out right before I had to walk on stage because I was so freaked out. And they were they were amazing. They just, they were like, "We can see you're having a hard time. I think it would be good if you took 2 weeks and just relax and come back in 2 weeks." And
What
I
did you
did.
think?
And
What did you think when they said that? How did it feel?
I was embarrassed, but I was like, yes, please. I don't want to do this anymore. It was horrifying.
I'm so grateful for audiobooks for that reason, because I remember those. I mean, nowhere in the level that you were at, nowhere even near. And even then, that panic and fear,
Oh
and
yeah.
even learning the lines in the beginning, the stress of like, am I going to be off book? I have to be off book. And audiobooks, never, ever, ever going to happen.
No, I know.
It's such a luxury, and I'm grateful for it every book.
Me too. Me too. Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
But my dad was always, as an adult actor, my dad has always been a real source of strength for me, because as to adults, and he as my father, obviously, and having a life in the theater, I can really lean on him and go, oh God, this is what's happening. Oh God. And to have a parent who understands that, I mean, my mother would absolutely too, but
Yeah.
to have a parent who would so innately understand what was going on, why it happened, how I had to deal with stage management. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
contractually, what does that mean? You know, all those things.
A colleague as well as a father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A real mentor,
That's
and
not many people
yeah,
get that.
right. And a supporter. I mean, when I was doing Grand Hotel, the Martin Beck is on 45th Street, and Phantom is also on 45th Street, right, Jim? Yeah.
Yeah.
So my dad would get off his subway. I always go to the theater way, way early. And he always goes right at half hour. So my dad would walk down the street, and my dressing room looked right down onto 45th Street. And my dad would be like, Jenn, just saying hello. And he would like wave to me and yell up to my dressing room, and then go to his show half a block down the block. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And then when I did Les Mis, which is on the other side of on the other block, he would come visit me in my dressing room and like hang out with the Les Mis people. And then inevitably he'd like be like, oh shit, I'm late for half hour. And he would have to run through the Majestic and go across the street to his theater. It was great.
Okay, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, where did audiobooks come into all of this? And James wants to know, was it at the Imperial then?
You mean Les Mis? Yeah,
Yeah.
it was right. It was right around the corner.
So audiobooks.
Audiobooks. Wow. Yeah. I've had so many life quadrants. I became a mom, and I was just a stay-at-home mom, or just stay-at-home mom. Then I became a makeup artist. Then I moved and I became a teacher and a coach. And then I got divorced, and I live in a community of artists. And my friend works with Ken Burns as a documentary filmmaker, one of his filmmakers. And he just on a whim, he's like, can you come read this scratch copy for me for this, Custer? And I was like, okay. He's like, I need an actor, not a voiceover person. And I was like, okay, whatever. Went and did it. And I ended up being in the Custer Ken Burns documentary. And that happened 3 times. I did I've done 4 PBS documentary voiceovers.
Wow.
Just because I had a friend down the street who I got my hay from, who was like, I'd like to hear you do this. So I did.
Wow.
So that really made me curious about that kind of work. But I was a TV casting director at that point. So I really didn't need a job. And then I got cancer and the pandemic, and
wait, before all these, I mean, they're big, but can I move you back to being a TV casting director?
yeah.
When you were a TV casting director, what did you learn about people approaching you and people's approach, and what would you wish people knew
Well,
not to do?
Right. I was doing casting and creative for nonfiction TV, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't getting approached by talent all the time, and creatives. And I think there's this thought about being persistent and like, be persistent, don't take no for an answer, be persistent, be persistent. And I think that it's very tricky, fine line. Like, don't not be persistent, but also learn to read what a person is saying in the email, learn to read between the lines. And if somebody says, I'm not interested, thank you so much for reaching out, this is not, you're not my thing, don't contact them again. Because I guarantee you the next time, read the room. People don't know how to read the room. And it's really, it's a hard skill, I think. I think it's a hard skill, but actors innately are able to do that most of the time.
But you think it's obvious. You assume that there's a certain level of play well with others. But I saw a writer on Twitter say, I'm embarrassed to admit that I even looked at Twitter, but I saw a writer on Twitter. She's accepting queries for people's books. And she said, this shouldn't need to be said, but can I just say, if you're submitting your query, don't show up at my home and don't show up at my parents' home to stick your manuscript in their face. And
I know.
I'm like, oh, God. What? Really?
I had that with an author right when I started audiobooks. I was doing the indie author thing, he had a rom-com and he hadn't gotten a narrator. And all of a sudden it went from like normal to not normal. And I was like, oh God. He's like, I just want to listen to you. You know, it's like,
oh no. See, we have to protect ourselves. We do have to be smart and protect ourselves, because when you're new, you don't know. But it's so, like, I guess you're right. On our side, yes, send something out every like few, but try not to be a stalker. And also maybe don't give your like personal email address.
And also, I think it's so important to not take things personally, you know, because everyone you deal with, I just heard this recently, and it was kind of, I was talking to my dad about this, because he was always the guy who would treat everyone the same. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if they were the cook, the garbage man, the president, the Pope, the stage manager, John Caird. It didn't fuck all matter. Everybody is the same, right? And that's how you treat them. And that's how I was raised. And I really took that to heart. But I also think, you know, really think about if somebody is shitty. Oh, I know. It was in a book I just narrated. One of the characters, somebody was like, that guy was being shitty. And the boyfriend says, well, you know, I'm going to buy him his coffee. And she's like, why are you going to buy him his coffee? He was being a total ass. And he's like, my dad always taught me, treat everyone like they might be having the worst day of their life, and you just don't know. And I think that's
I heard everyone's doing the best they can with what they were given.
I think it's valuable, you know. I think it's valuable, and it really takes the heat out of certain situations.
Yeah, it makes okay.
But so I would say, you know, there are instances where you're like, I'm so glad that person reached out to me today, because that really makes sense. So you don't know, right? But yeah.
Yeah, I do think, I think the older and grumpier I get, I'm starting to think that, like, if it was meant to be, it'll be. So me pushing extra hard isn't going to increase my chances of being in the right place at the right time. I just do what I do enthusiastically, which I'd lost when you learn to be a grown-up. And that'll be enough. Because that try extra, do more, be more, because then I'll get lucky, and that's what it takes. Because if I'm just myself, it won't be enough. But I'm kind of finally learning, maybe like pull back on the gear a bit, and or the throttle or whatever. I haven't driven in a while. And if it's meant to be, I will be the right girl at the right time, even though there are one or two that I've missed out on that really were mine.
I know.
But you can't be it all everywhere. So I interrupted you. I took you back to casting and you were telling me, so then the pandemic, the health diagnosis, and had you already started audiobooks at this point? At what point did you start audiobooks? Like full-time audiobooks?
I started I started studying in seriousness with a coach in the city who was amazing, and she's passed away unfortunately, but she also had cancer, so it was a real sort of lovely meeting of the minds. And I think 2 months before the pandemic started, I started.
Wow.
And so I did start recording audiobooks right as the pandemic hit, but I'm always like, but I didn't do it just because of the pandemic. I didn't know.
But half of the Cup of Joe is made up of people that started right around when the pandemic. And even if they did do it because of the pandemic, I think that a lot of it is because the pandemic gave them the mental space and the guts to step back and look at what they wanted to do. My judgment is, are you willing to put your boots on the ground and keep putting the work in? If you're here 4 or 5 years later, then I'm saluting you. I don't care if someone started yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. But you have to love it and you have to work your ass off. If you started yesterday and want to pay for your pizza money and think you're going to make a fortune because you're better than everyone else, you know what I mean? Then I've got judgment.
Yeah.
Maybe not
I mean, it was, I kind of knew I had wanted to pursue audiobooks like maybe 5 years before, but it just wasn't the right time. And I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I just didn't do it. I didn't have the wherewithal to do it for a million different reasons. I wasn't brave enough to do it. I couldn't figure out how to do it.
I was the same. I was the
It was
same.
just a different time. And
You
that's
do it when you're ready, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had started 5 years ago.
I know. I was on Amazon looking at how do you record an audiobook on Amazon? What do I buy? A little mic here? I was looking at other voiceover sites, looking at people's clips, just seething with
right. I was calling people saying, do you have an audiobook agent?
Yeah. But you started when it was meant for you to start. And oh my God, look how far you've come.
Well,
in a short
I
time.
started because I went to lunch with a friend, and I remember us sitting in the coffee shop. And at that point, I had maybe taken 2 voiceover classes and was just focusing on commercial stuff first. And I said, you know what, I really want to do this. I don't want to work in TV anymore. I don't like working in TV as much as I love my coworkers and I love the creativity of it. I do not want to work in TV. I don't, even though I'm pretty good at it.
But you're a lifer. That's what it is. You're a lifer. And it's pretty evident right from the beginning when someone's a lifer or whether they're not. And you are a lifer.
Yeah.
You are.
And he said to me, and I remember first we were talking about our friend Craig, who owns the coffee shop, came up to us and we were like, what the heck with this pandemic stuff? And Craig's like, don't worry about it. It's not going to be a thing. We're like, are you sure? And then our next conversation was about voiceover stuff. And it was my friend Lithgow. And he was like, so when are you going to really start? When are you going to start? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm taking classes. He's like, just go start. And I was like, today? He's like, yes, go figure it out today.
All right, Lithgow. We all need a Lithgow.
Oh, Lithgow would be, oh my God. Lithgow's an amazing, wonderful person and character as well. And that is what I did. He said, what are you waiting for? You've got fucking cancer and you're 50. Don't you think you should go?
Okay, Lithgow, maybe you could have stopped it. Just start.
I can't. I'm not tiptoeing around. I don't tiptoe around cancer. It's exhausting.
Oh, it wasn't the cancer. It was the 50.
No, right. It's true though. You get to 50 and you're like,
I'm totally joking. Totally joking.
Am I going to learn how to play the guitar? I don't know. I'm 50 now.
Well, that's the great thing, because I love this. Somebody said the other day about oh, it's an audiobook I'm listening to. yeah, he said he made a comment of his time travel audiobook, and he made a comment about, oh, I just hit 50, that time when you reassess everything in your life and you realize you don't have much time left. And every single person goes through that right around that age, and every single person thinks it's only them. Why am I so depressed?
But I also wanted to have something, you know, I want to have messages that are out in the universe that people can visit me if they want. And that's an audiobook.
Yeah.
And I want to leave something in the universe that makes someone laugh or cry or is moved or they don't feel so lonely or they're entertained. That's an audiobook.
And through an audiobook, it's your essence. Jenn is still there. I thought about that the other day when they're talking about AI and people can take your voice and all that. And somebody said to me, if anyone's going to be cloned, you are, because your voice, you know, you're really, you know, the gates closed on that one. But how cool that you're still there. You're still there, no matter what happens millions of years from now, maybe. Somebody can listen to you and your energy goes out and meets them. Your old coach, did they do audiobooks as well? Can you still listen to your old coach's audiobooks?
My coach was a commercial lady, and she had this guy come in and give like an audiobook class. I don't know who he was. I've never seen him again. I've never seen him as a narrator again. Apparently he does a lot of audiobooks, but I feel like, yeah, I don't know if that was an audiobook class. He had us do like Shakespeare sonnets, and I was like, okay, I guess. But then I ended up studying like for real, you know, with coaches and people like that. My first coach was
sorry,
Joel.
I was gonna say, what was your first book and how did it feel when you got it?
Well, it was ACX, of course, and it was I got 2 books at the same time.
Oh wow.
Like I did 2 auditions and I got those 2 books because I just did. And one was called A Bride for Daryl, which was a Western mystery. Shut up. And the
I'm not laughing.
And the other was called Love's Deception, which is a Mormon clean romance.
I'm not laughing at those books either. If either of the authors ever watch this, I'm not laughing at your books.
They're not going to watch it. And
it's
they were
having done ACX. We all
fine.
know. And also, we all know the feeling that like those are the titles, and we feel like it's like the biggest deal on earth. Like we've just been given a Pulitzer Prize.
A Bride for Daryl, which is like book 16 in the A Bride for series. And but then you know,
Daryl.
So I've got friends who've like, you know, done stuff. Not that they don't give a shit what I do. They don't give a shit what I have done or what I do. However, I've got friends, and I went to a dinner party and I was like, oh, and they were like, oh my God, what is it? Is it like Jodi Picoult's or however you say her new bestseller? And I was like, no. Like, what's the name of it? And I'm like, A Bride for Daryl.
But that's it. I mean, haven't you? My husband's like, every once in a while, you should try to do some of the Harry Potter books.
I know.
Sure, I'll get right on that.
I was talking to somebody about a bestseller that's coming out, and they're like, oh, did you narrate it? My dad, I know if he watches this, he'll laugh, but we were talking about Babel because I love that book. And I was like, oh, it's this and it's that, and it's so great. And he's like, wait, did you narrate it? And I was like, no. I couldn't have, and also no, I did not narrate that.
You don't know until you know. It's lovely. It's lovely that I think there was a Sex and the City thing where she recorded her own audiobook. I personally can't stand the second series of it, but I gave in through lack of anything to binge on late at night. And she recorded her own audiobook. And somebody was on
Right.
Facebook
No, I haven't
saying,
seen that yet.
"Oh, it's I won't give away any sport. I
No,
won't give
I've
any
heard people,
spoilers."
I've seen people chitter chattering about it.
Yeah, it's like, oh God, they literally just don't know. They literally just don't know. And then
Hey,
you get a
I
lot of
was,
classes where they don't know either how to be an audiobook narrator, and it's voiceover people that have like never done an audiobook, and they're telling you to like cut out every single breath between every single sentence because for their 2-minute clip, that's always worked for them. It's,
I was delighted.
yeah,
And I'm still delighted because they were funny, romantic books that I was very suited toward at the very beginning. They were something I could do, and I didn't have to stretch overly. I had to learn how to do an audiobook, and they were the perfect kind of things. And so,
but
yay.
it's honoring
Yay for a
everything.
bride for Daryl.
But
Woohoo!
the thing is, it's honoring every book we get. You find,
That's
and I
right.
think Joel said that you find a way to love and honor, and I think in general we all are very good at that. We can laugh about titles and things. I mean, when I did try to use a pseudonym, I did make some dodgy choices. I didn't know there was a genre about space and all that, but
Race.
yes, I would never tell anyone the name I did those books under. And in general, we manage to love and honor every book we do, or we wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I said this on James Cheatham's little podcast thing. It's like most people have had scene partners where it's your love interest, it's a love story. You and that person do not click.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's your job. You get to figure out a way to love that person. Good. It's kind of a metaphor for life. Figure it out, because you have to love that person. You have to figure out how to love it. And I was just laughing about this. I was sending a note to a publisher of a book I just did that I loved. And I was like, this is like one of my favorite, maybe my favorite book I ever did. And I was like, I think I write this in every fucking email because it's true. It's true. And I get very upset. Like, one of my books it's a very popular horror book, but some of the reviews are not great. I don't understand why. But some of the reviews are iffy, and I get very upset when I read those reviews about the storyline or whatever. And I'm like, what are they talking about? That doesn't make any sense, because they feel like my children. I love them.
Yeah.
I love my books so much. I love them, and that you have to love them. You have to.
You have to buy. I'm doing a nonfiction I just started, and it did occur to me that most people would do it in dry, informative. And I'm like, I shouldn't be wanting to cry on 15 minutes into this book. Like, maybe I'm being too like emotive.
I know several people who would not agree. They would say that's exactly what you should do.
Yeah. It's I think,
because
but
they
it's
wrote it with passion. They wrote it because they love it.
Yeah, it's a
They
big.
didn't write it because they're
And
going to
I can't say what it's about, but it's a big cultural, really, really hugely important book about a hugely important matter. And the importance it weighs heavily on me as I'm narrating it, because I mean, but I think it goes back to what you said, and it stays with me. I think I twisted what you said, and immediately before it even came out of your mouth completely, but I got the gist of it. It's what we put out there. It's what we're sharing, and it's there, and it's our gift. And the book is a gift to us. And then what we do with it is our gift to them, isn't it? And
it is my blessing to be able to read it. I'm blessed to be given the chance to be the person who's shepherding it into audio.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be woo-woo, but I am a little woo-woo.
But I
So
think we need to
me and
be
myself.
woo-woo at this point, because the thing is, we do our jobs because we deeply, deeply believe. I think, I think if you don't want to believe and go there, then get another job, because so we all apologize. We all get on here and go, no, it's our soul. And then we immediately go, I know this might put people off, but the thing is, why? Because didn't we all learn during the pandemic that we all crave it?
I also think the best things that ever happened to me on stage were those moments where I was able to disappear and not really remember, not in a bad way, but because I was able to drop in.
Yeah.
And that felt magical and that felt right. And I think that audiobooks, for me, I can only speak for myself, but they give me a ton more of that than being on stage ever did. I find it often easy to drop in and be in it in a way much less so than when I was on stage with questioning and trying to get it right and da 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 da. And of course I do that in audiobooks. Of course I do.
Yeah.
But I do it more in coaching sessions and things like that. When I'm recording my book, I can get into that magic. I try to get into that magic place and am able to pretty much more often than I did on stage. And that's why, sure, I guess I could do a show. Oh, sure, depending on what it is. But if I never do a show again, I don't feel teary about that, because I do a fucking show every night.
Yeah, it gives you, that's how I
I
felt
do
about
two
theater.
one-person shows, and I run my own light board, and I call my own half hour.
Yeah,
You
it
know what I
gives you everything that you got. I do miss right before the curtain opens. I do miss that moment. You don't get, I don't get, there's that breath in the air is my favorite moment in the whole world. I feel like the world's frozen, where
I
other
miss the
people are like,
smell of a theater. Yeah.
oh, I miss the dressing room.
I wish somebody would make like theater smell spray.
I wish somebody would make the lighting that you get in the dressing room when the promise of being the most beautiful thing in the entire world, even if you're going to put on fur, whatever, you've got the promise of being something just magic in a dressing room. I love the older the building, the better, the lighting.
Yeah.
I wish my whole life could be in like a dressing room and the quiet before but audiobooks, I never have to worry about whether people are going to judge me or whether I'm thin enough, which, sorry, we all have our things, or whether they think they're better than me, or whether I think I'm better than them, or whether so and so has more training. I don't have to worry about that. It's my booth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think people are like, why? You don't need to go to that workshop. You don't need to go on that retreat. You know, don't you need to save your money? And for me, what I miss is being at the theater, just being at the theater.
Yeah.
So when we're at our narrator things, while it's not the same, it's a little bit like being with your cast.
Oh, I might need to go to one now. That's the first thing anyone's ever said that actually really tempted me.
It's a little bit like being with your theater family. I mean, it's a lot like being with your theater family, but you're just not doing a show. But
Kim has a question for you along that line. Kim says, what was the most haunted theater you've ever spent time in?
Haunted theater.
You got to give us one haunted theater.
You know, I don't have a haunted theater. However, I do have a haunted actors housing story, which is really good.
Yes, please tell us the story.
So I was doing Wonderful Town at Goodspeed Opera House. And Goodspeed Opera House, for those of you who don't know, is like this old opera house in Connecticut. It's on the river. It's in this little town. The acting housing at that point, I think I was 20, 22 maybe. the actor housing at that point were all these little Victorian houses that were along the street. It's a tiny town. There's no town really. It was just the theater and some houses and a graveyard. And I was playing, the show is Wonderful Town. It's about my sister Eileen. And I was playing the sister, the young sister. And they put the leads in this huge yellow Victorian fucking out of a storybook, stereotypical massive Victorian house with a widow's walk. And when you went inside along the walls, there was gilded molding that was stuck out really far, and like, you could see inside the molding and shit like that. And there were like chandeliers, and it was this big house, and it had servants' quarters, and it had this stairway that went, the whole thing. Widow's Walk. Did I mention the Widow's Walk?
Yeah, the Widow's Walk as well.
At that point, there were only 5 registered haunted houses in America, and it was one of them.
Who was the ghost?
Well, there were multiple stories of things that had happened there. Most specifically, that some man had shoved his wife down the stairs. Of course, my room, you went in the big front doors, right? And my room was the parlor that was right off the front doors, the big front parlor with
where she landed.
A window where she landed, because the staircase was right there. It was fucking spooky, but we would always hear people walking around in the servants' quarters, but there was nobody up there. But we would hear people walking around up there. And also, there was the other lead had a baby, and her husband would get up with the baby at night. And one night he got up with the baby and he lay down on the couch with the baby, and the big chandelier was just waving back and forth while he was up with the baby. And then people would all go back to New York City for their days off because it's close-ish. But I stayed with another person in the cast and some crew people that we were friends with. And my girlfriend and I think I don't know where we went, but we came back to my room, and it was nighttime, and it was like storming and stuff like that. And we were supposed to meet some people, but we didn't know where they were. We couldn't find them. And so we went into my room, and we were like probably having wine coolers or something ridiculous like that. And we're just sitting there, and we're like, this house is fucking spooky when everyone's gone. It was just us in this huge, she's like, I don't think I can sleep in my room alone. I think we have to sleep in each other's rooms. So I think you're right. It's terrifying here with nobody here because everybody was gone.
Yeah. And
we're sitting there talking, and then all of a sudden a hand comes out from under my bed and grabs me by the ankles. Screaming. Oh my God. We screamed and screamed. It was my friend Ben.
I was going to say,
yeah. He waited for hours under that bed to scare us because he knew he was also going to stay in the house. It was just going to be the 3 of us in that big house. And he waited.
You guys made it through the night, though.
It was terrifying. But like that molding, you always felt like someone could be watching you through that molding. That it's like, yeah. No, I don't tell a short story. I'm sorry.
No. I love that. I love a haunted story in theory, but then in real life, I don't tend to be as okay. Final last words. Like, what would you like to leave the YouTube audience with for the next 60 years? If you want them to take away anything from this call, any words of wisdom, any piece of advice, one thing to walk away with from this call, what would you like it to be?
I think that I really feel like the phrase no mud, no lotus. Have you ever heard that?
I haven't heard that one. Oh, I mean, it makes sense, but I've never heard it.
It's a Buddhist thing, and the lotus flower only grows in mud.
I
and
like
it
that.
grows this beautiful flower. And I think that after having this long life of all these different things and really amazing things and really not great things, like really not great things, I think that you always have the mud, but you can make goodness out of it. I think you can find goodness in things. And so another thing that cancer and people with, you know, serious disease say is you switch what if to even if. So if you just think of that in your life, and you're saying, what if this happens? What if I get sick? What if this person dies? What if I don't get a job? If you just make a teeny tiny switch to even if, it just lets you go, instead of going, oh, it lets you go, oh, what will happen? What could happen? What could I do? Even if I don't get another audiobook for 6 months, even if I get more cancer, even if I get divorced, even if there's another pandemic, it just shoots you in a better direction than what if. And I think it's useful. I think it's useful when we're in times of terror and disappointment and confusion. And those are the two things that I really try to remember. It's not like I'm like, oh, I always remember these things, but
it's an interesting, because I live in what if, like 24/7.
right.
I've
Well,
never even considered even
give
if.
yourself 24 hours to switch that word and see what happens.
An
It's
interesting
kind of
concept.
amazing.
Yeah.
Because it
Even
really
if.
makes your brain go, oh, even if I don't get an audiobook ever again in my whole life, not probably going to happen, but even if I don't, then what? Then what will I do? Then you start making plans and you start dreaming and you start advocating for yourself and your soul and your life.
I really love that, because, and as you say that, it's clear as well, because what if you still go down other paths, but you go down more what ifs? What if, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, it gets worse. You don't just
go down
stop.
into bad. It leads you to mostly bad things. What if there's another pandemic? Then the next thing you say after what if is, then this terrible thing is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then this terrible thing is going to happen. And even if there's another pandemic, I can finish the book that I'm writing. Even if there's another pandemic, I can still go work at Barnes & Noble or Trader Joe's. Even if I get more cancer, I can still do my audiobooks. Even if I can't do audiobooks anymore, I can write books.
I'm so going to try that. I'm so going to try that. I'm really going to try that as of today. I'm going to try that. That's also going to be
try it. Just I consider. I would say consider it. I don't like to give out edicts that this is going to work, but I would ask you to consider thinking about it sometimes.
Yeah, no, I'm totally jumping in. It's going on my spreadsheet. I'm going to plan it. It's done.
Yeah, great.
I'm not a considerate kind of guy.
All right. Don't consider. Just fucking do it.
Yeah, I'm going to fucking do it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jen. This has been just this. I say this a lot, but I mean it every time. This was the call we needed tonight. And I'm so grateful. Your 600 friends are grateful. Thank you to the gorgeous studio audience. I can't wait to see all you guys. And you guys, I'll let you know when the video's up. And it's been wonderful. We will see you around.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone. Bye.